ask Kayla to call the roll.
Thank you, Linda Diane. So I have received regrets from Commissioner Margolis, who is attending a Board of Education meeting, and also Steve Dolan, Molly Kleinman, and Bradley Parsons, who have personal conflicts and are not able to join us this evening. So I will now call roll. Please say here when your name is called. Councilmember Griswold. Commissioner Boland.
Here.
Commissioner Felt.
Here.
Commissioner Fern.
Here.
Commissioner Gordon.
Here.
Commissioner Hull.
Here.
Commissioner Nahidi.
Here.
Commissioner Sims.
Here.
Commissioner Trudeau.
Here.
Sergeant Bill Clock.
Here.
Commissioner Hess.
Here.
Commissioner Lazarus. Commissioner Webb. We have a quorum.
Great. We want to approve of the agenda, but there's a slight switch in the agenda.
You know,
Okay.
Madam Chair, let's go ahead and keep it the way it is. One of the
Oh.
speakers that we were expecting isn't
Okay.
in the audience yet, so we'll keep it the way. Thank you.
Unless there's any other changes, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda. Okay, Scott, and seconded by?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We have an agenda. All right, then we open it up to public comment, and you can have 3 minutes, which Kayla will let you know when you're out of time. Is there anyone here who'd like to speak?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Yuri Popov. I have been teaching at the University of Michigan for more than a decade, and I'm a member of advisory board for the Detroit Connector, the university-funded bus service between Ann Arbor and Detroit. However, I do not represent the university today, and I speak on my own behalf. I'm also a lifelong public transit user who takes a bus to work daily. Today, I would like to speak to the Commission about the Washtenaw Avenue Bus Rapid Transit project currently developed by the AAATA. This project is intended to establish a limited stop bus service between downtown Ypsilanti and downtown Ann Arbor along one of the heaviest ridership transit corridors in Washtenaw County, where 5,000 people ride buses daily. Overall, this is an excellent idea, and a long overdue one too. I fully support the project as a whole. However, there is a problem with the proposed routing of this limited stop bus service through the University of Michigan. The AAATA has considered 3 options, one serving the hospital, another serving the central campus, and the third one serving neither. None of the considered route alternatives would serve both the central campus and the hospital. For the reasons outlined in the report, the alternative serving only the hospital has been selected as the primary option for this limited stop bus route. As a result, the University of Michigan Central Campus would be served by only one remote BRT stop at the intersection of Washtenaw Avenue and South University. This stop would simply be too far away from anything interesting or important. It is a quarter mile away from the nearest corner of the campus. It is more than half a mile away from most university buildings. I think it is vital. To establish for this newly established limited stop bus service to serve both the central campus and the hospitals. In fact, it is possible to do so with the route shown on the map, and I'm showing the second map, which is my proposition essentially. Moreover, it is important to establish a stop as close as possible to the Central Campus Transit Center, the busiest transit hub in the city of Ann Arbor. The distributed map attempts to illustrate such an option. You have it in front of you on the back of the handout. The map has 2 panels. The left one is for the inbound routing towards the Blake Transit Center, and the right one is for the outbound routing towards the Ypsilanti Transit Center. There are several benefits of the proposed route and stop locations. First, the Central Campus BRT stop would be much closer to most campus buildings and activity centers than the stops in the current AAATA proposal. The new stop locations would be more convenient for passengers, and walking distances to more destinations would be minimized. Second, the Central Campus BRT stops would be very close to the Central Campus Transit Center. Convenient transfers between the BRT and the University of Michigan Blue Bus system, as well as other AAATA routes, would become possible. Third, the hospital stops would be as closely located to the university hospital as in the original AAATA proposal. Finally, the proposed route, both inbound and outbound, would be fast and straightforward. It does not require any changes to the existing traffic patterns. In particular, no new traffic lights or crosswalk would be needed, just 15 seconds. I respectfully request that the Commission endorse the idea that the bus rapid transit route needs to serve both the Central Campus and the University Hospital, that is, both largest employers in the city of Ann Arbor. Any half measures or semi-solutions are unacceptable. Our city deserves better. Thank you. I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We don't usually do an interaction
Okay.
right at this time, but thanks for the handout as well. Okay.
Hi, good evening, Clark Chernetsky. I gave you a handout. When people think of the Amtrak station in Ann Arbor, they think of trains only. But for the past 2 years, it's also served as the Ann Arbor station for Greyhound, Barron Bus, and Miller Transportation. These are intercity buses. And as you see on this sheet, there's a list of times and where the buses that stop in Ann Arbor come from and go to, as well as the trains. And on the reverse side, you see a list of places you can get to or get from to Ann Arbor by train or bus. And there are 41 destinations. And I didn't realize quite how many there were until I started this project. And such places, not only on the Detroit-Chicago train route, but also by bus you can come or go to Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Fort Wayne, and 3 times a day there's a round trip between Chicago, Ann Arbor, Detroit, and Toronto without changing bus. So it's a very busy place, as you can see here. And that's put quite a load on the present station, which is inadequate for the number of people served. There are each year over 150,000 train passengers that use the station, and an estimated 50,000 intercity bus passengers. So it's a very busy place. So when people talk about the train station or the proposed move of the train station to Fuller Road, also don't forget that you have a lot of intercity bus passengers that the people in this area rely upon. Lastly, I'd like to second what Yuri had just told you about the need for a bus rapid transit system between Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti to serve both the medical center and the Central Campus area. I think it can be done. And one other thing, the other night somebody was hit around 10 o'clock at night by Rackham on Huron. And I've seen in comments mentioning dark clothing, and I've worried about that. I've got this now getting to be kind of a grungy yellow coat. I've tried to replace it. I went to over a dozen stores looking for one. I can't find a light colored one. They're all dark colors nowadays. So I wish the stores would carry at least one light color of a winter jacket. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your handout. Is there anybody else who'd like to address the commission? All right. Then we have some minutes to approve. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? Okay, then I'll take a motion to approve. Okay, by Scott. You have to say. Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? We have minutes. Great. So, we have the street resurfacing and related projects presentation. Up next. That's 35 minutes for both the presentation and questions and answers.
Correct. We plan on around 20 to 25 minutes of presentation and at least 10 minutes remaining for questions.
Thank you, members of the commission. My name is Dave Dykman. I'm one of the city's civil engineers, and I serve as a project manager for the city of Ann Arbor for capital improvement projects, and I also oversee the city's street resurfacing program. I'm here to present tonight the proposed 2019 street resurfacing improvements that we're currently working on to get under contract later this winter and early spring. In terms of a little bit of background concerning the street resurfacing program itself, resurfacing improvements are intended to restore the condition of pavements to a very good or excellent condition while also enhancing the functionality and safety of both, or for both motorized and non-motorized users. Typically, these improvements are identified through the planning process utilizing the city's pavement asset management data, and then they are programmed for funding and construction through the city's capital improvement plan process. Improvements may be both non-structural or preservation in nature, or structural, which involves rehabilitation, restoration type improvements. They are generally contained within the existing footprint of the roadway. They involve very little, if any, geometric changes. They usually require very little, if any, survey data collection. The nature of them is that they're less complex in projects and involve minimal detailed design. They also require no additional right-of-way or easements. Lastly, they involve a selection of candidate streets for inclusion in one of various types of annual projects that the city lets out for bid each construction season, those being, for example, the street resurfacing project, we have a street surface treatment project, a preservation or preventative maintenance project, and sometimes these are let as standalone projects. It just depends on the scope of the particular project. Typical considerations for opportunities examined during the project planning process include methods to structurally rehabilitate or restore the pavement condition and or preserve the condition, which will ultimately extend the service life of the street or roadway. We also look at the feasibility to incorporate improvements identified in the city's non-motorized transportation plan, look at the feasibility to incorporate any stormwater management improvements or any other necessary drainage improvements, necessary improvements to achieve compliance with the current Americans with Disabilities Act standards, and also feasibility or necessity for safety improvements. In terms of the different types of preservation, restoration, or rehabilitation measures, they're listed here. In terms of preservation, we have a surface treatment or surface seals. These are typically called microsurface or cape seals. Examples of these that we've done recently are on a microsurface. We did all of South Main, leading out of downtown toward the U of M stadium, and further south to Ann Arbor-Saline Road, and including Ann Arbor-Saline Road. A cape seal is a similar process. We did that on South Main Street down near Briarwood Mall, also on North Maple Road this past construction season, and on Huron Parkway between Washtenaw and the bridges over Getty's Avenue and the Huron River. Other types of preservation treatments include thin overlays. We've done several of those recently, including Stadium Boulevard in front of Pioneer High School and several other projects, locations around the city. And also projects that involve locally minimized minimal pavement repairs, either removing typically partial depth of the pavement to patch it, and then placing a surface seal overlay or thin mill and fill. In terms of restoration type projects, these are more structural in nature, where the pavement condition is generally in fair or poor condition, and something structural needs to be done. These include doing more localized, significant types of pavement repairs and patching, either full depth or partial depth, and then placing a thicker overlay or mill and overlay on top of that existing pavement. They also include partial depth pavement removal, so we'll go down generally 4 inches or so, depending on the existing pavement thickness. We'll mill that out, and then we'll place an overlay of that same thickness over top of the pavement. Lastly, there's rehabilitation, which again is structural in nature. It generally involves removing the entire pavement section and replacing it, doing any necessary base repairs. And then we also do, sometimes, not very often, we'll pulverize the pavement. That means we'll basically crush the existing pavement, regrade and shape it and place a new asphalt pavement on top of it. Non-motorized transportation plan improvements that we generally look to and identify through the resurfacing program include the addition of bike lanes along a project corridor, the narrowing of traffic lanes, the reconfiguration of traffic lanes to eliminate either on-street parking or possibly even doing a road diet going from a 4 to 3 or a 3 to 2 lane conversion. We look to add mid-block crossings where they've been identified in the plan, and also add, potentially add sidewalks and asphalt paths. But that's pretty rare that we do that. Those generally require some type of easement, but if there's opportunities where we can do that and they're minimal, we try to address those. With regard to storm drainage and stormwater management, we oftentimes will remove and replace segments of failed curb and gutter or curb that's in poor condition. We'll generally replace all the stormwater inlets in the curb that are not to our current standards. We'll at times look at revising the pavement cross slope to improve the drainage of the water off the surface and eliminate some ponding and things of that nature. We'll look to install infiltration basins to better manage the stormwater along the project corridor. And then we even at times look to install oversized storm sewer pipes and other types of drainage control structures to better manage stormwater. ADA improvements include the removal and replacement of concrete sidewalks and ramps, the addition of small missing segments of concrete sidewalk or ramps, and then sidewalk ramp repairs. Generally, these are just to bring the current sidewalk system into compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Safety improvements would include curb bump outs to shorten crosswalks and better improve visibility for pedestrians in using those crosswalks and mid-block crossings. And then also enhancing pavement markings and traffic signing to provide better visibility and guidance for users of the roadway system. In terms of this year's proposed street improvements, I apologize, the map that's shown in the slide isn't very visible, but there is a print back here that people are welcome to take a look at that identifies all the proposed street improvements that the city is planning for 2019. At this point, there's actually going to be probably another project that identifies additional improvements on the local street network that we're currently working on. In terms of the resurfacing type of improvements that are both preservation or restorative or rehabilitative in nature, we have 7.1 miles of planned preservation treatments on the city's major street network and 2.7 miles of restoration or rehabilitation type improvements on that network. In terms of the local street network, we have 6.1 miles identified as preservation improvements for the coming construction season and 4.3 miles of restoration and rehab structural improvements on that network. Tonight I'm going to speak to you in a little bit more detail about the 6 different locations identified as part of the resurfacing projects for this year that involve where we've identified it and involve non-motorized improvements. Those include Platte Road from Huron Parkway to Washtenaw, South Division from Hoover up to East Madison, Stone School Road from I-94 north to East Eisenhower Parkway, Traverwood from Plymouth to South Huron Parkway, Green Road from Plymouth to Gettysburg and Burbank intersection, and then a section of asphalt path on Fuller Road and South Huron Parkway fronting a portion of the Huron High School property frontage there. So with regard to Platte Road, we're considering this a restoration type improvement where we're planning to mill off a portion of the existing pavement surface and replace it. We'll remove and replace drainage inlets that currently aren't functional. We'll replace any non-compliant sidewalk ramps. Primarily that involves just one up at the corner of Washtenaw and Platte Road. I guess it's the southeast corner there. We do have a ramp that's not in compliance. We'll be removing certain segments of curb and gutter that is not presently functioning, as well as any concrete driveway openings. We'll be replacing new pavement markings, replacing new or replacement signs, and then restoring any disturbed areas as a result of construction activity. With regard to the non-motorized improvements that were identified in the city's non-motorized plan, we are proposing to add bike lanes along both sides of this pavement. So that you can see the existing lane configuration doesn't presently include bike lanes, but there's enough pavement width out there identified to allow for bike lanes in each direction along that segment of Flat Road. And then we'll be narrowing up the existing traffic lanes to accommodate those bike lanes. Next street is South Division Street from Hoover running north to East Madison. This is more of a preservation type treatment. We're going to do a thin mill and fill on it just to replace the uppermost layer of the existing asphalt pavement to improve its condition. This is more of a short-term fix. This street is slated for reconstruction at some point in the future. Yeah, it's yet to be determined, but we wanted to attempt to address the current condition of the pavement. So there's going to be that together with some minor removal of curb and gutter segments, but again, it's going to be very minor, only those that really are not functioning or failed. Some minor drainage improvements, and then we'll be placing new pavement markings, again, new signing or replacement traffic signing and restoration. City's non-motorized plan has identified this corridor as a candidate for a bike lane in the northbound direction. So as you can see here, this is the picture that's shown there on the left is the existing condition north of Hill Street, where it shows essentially one wide traffic lane in the northbound direction, bounded by parking on both sides of the street. The plan is to maintain that parking while providing a bike lane and a buffer in the northbound direction. So you can see the picture on the right shows parking on the far west side of the street, a through lane, then a parking lane adjacent to that traffic lane with a buffer, and then a bike lane along the curb line. The intent is to do something similar to this, with exception to the parking on the west side of the street, on the segments south of Hill Street. Presently, those segments operate with traffic in the two-way direction. So we're exploring what the feasibility options are to doing so. We may have to, if you go back to the previous slide, two of the options being considered are either eliminating the parking along the east side to accommodate the new bike lane, or adjusting the curb line along the east side and possibly the west side and keep the existing parking in place while accommodating a new bike lane. Up on the north end, there's parking only on the east side of the street. We're proposing to move that parking to the west side of the street to accommodate the bike lane in the northbound direction for the entirety along that east side, as it shows here in this photo. Moving on to the next road is Stone School between I-94 and Eisenhower Parkway. This is either going to be a restoration type project or a full rehabilitation project. We're awaiting more information and data on the condition and the extent of the existing pavement. We don't know exactly how much asphalt we have out there, so we're waiting on that to make our final decision. But it will also include base repairs, and then we're planning to widen the shoulders, both with asphalt and gravel or aggregate, improve some of the roadside drainage, driveway approach work, place new pavement markings, again, place new or replacement traffic signing, and then restore those areas disturbed by the construction outside the pavement. In terms of near-term opportunities identified in the city's non-motorized plan, we're looking to add bike lanes on both sides of the roadway within this segment. That will involve widening out the pavement approximately 6 feet on either side to accommodate that new bike lane. We are looking at reconfiguring the intersection of Eisenhower Parkway and Stone School, but we haven't determined exactly what that configuration is going to be at this point in time. Moving on, we have Traverwood Drive up on the northeast part of the city between Plymouth Road and Huron Parkway. This is another restoration type project where we plan to mill and overlay and partially remove and reconstruct or rebuild the existing pavement section. We're planning on removing just some small minor segments of curb and gutter as well as driveway approaches. There is a little bit of ramp work required at both the north and south ends up near Huron Parkway in one of the corners, and then both ramps down at Plymouth Road where the crosswalk crosses on the north side. Those ramps are out of compliance. Again, we'll be placing new pavement markings, signing, and restoring areas. With regard to non-motorized improvements, we're looking at, this is presently a 3-lane configuration. It's hard to tell from the existing photograph there, but it's a lane in both the north, one lane operating in the northbound and one in the southbound with a center left turn lane through the entire corridor. Analysis has shown that there really is not a need for that center left turn lane, so we're proposing to eliminate it and then add a bike lane along the east side of the road, together with two through lanes and then parking along the west side of the road. If you go back to the previous slide. Up here in front of the library, there's currently a parking bay that's built outside of the roadway that has been problematic for some of its users because the slope behind that parking facility up to the adjacent sidewalk is relatively steep and is not considered traversable. So we're proposing to actually eliminate that parking bay, move the parking out into the roadway as shown here, and then flatten that slope out to make it more traversable for those that park along there. Green Road is the segment just north of Plymouth Road to up to, the Gettysburg or just south of the Gettysburg and Burbank intersection. This is a preservation treatment type of project. We're planning to repair and patch the existing asphalt pavement and then place a microsurfacing treatment over top of it. This will allow us to place new pavement markings and any new traffic signs and replace or install new traffic signs to accommodate the revised configuration. We're proposing to do a 4 to 3 lane conversion along this segment, which would primarily, the 4 to 3 would extend the current 4 to 3, the current 3-lane configuration, which is just north of the Burbank intersection here, the southerly Burbank intersection here, and would extend it down to Commonwealth Drive, just north of Commonwealth Drive. We're currently looking at options and analyzing what type of feasibility there is to reconfigure the lanes south of Commonwealth, where it actually widens out to like 5 and 6 lanes. Our surface treatment project just will end north of the Plymouth intersection where that was reconstructed in recent years. But the reconfiguration will run all the way into the intersection, all the way down to Plymouth Road. Once that's determined, we certainly can share that with the commission if they're interested. Lastly, we have, as I mentioned before, improvements to the shared use path along the north side of Fuller, adjacent to the Huron High School property and along the west side of Huron Parkway. Presently, we have an agreement with the Ann Arbor Public Schools to maintain this path, and that's the reason why we're undertaking this project. It involves full depth removal and patching to address areas where the pavement is completely deteriorated or failed. And then we'll be placing a new overlay on that existing path. Generally we go for a 3 or 4 inch overlay on the existing asphalt path. We'll make any sidewalk or ramp improvements that are necessary along that corridor, those being primarily up at the intersection here at Huron Parkway and Fuller, or up at the driveway, the northerly driveway there into the high school property. and then restoring any areas disturbed by the work that's done out there, so. With regard to the next steps on this project, we're currently in the design phase, and we hope to complete that by the end of February with final specs and cost estimating being done. We are anticipating bidding, or having the final bid package ready for advertisement by the end of that month, with an anticipated bid letting being sometime in mid to late March. Right now, construction is planned to begin sometime in early May and extend probably through the end of October. With that, I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has.
Yes, Kathy?
I have a few. Platt Road, what's the width of the bike lane and the traffic lane?
Platt Road, the proposed width is going to be 10 feet with I believe it's a 6-foot bike lane that includes the gutter pan, where you're going to be overlaying the gutter pan is currently overlaid, and we plan to re-overlay that gutter pan.
And on Traverwood, you're going to remove the parking next to the library there, you said, and I know.
Essentially, we're going to remove it where it presently is and move it out into the road, and then put a new barrier curb where there's currently it's just a shallow gutter pan that kind of defines the edge of the pavement presently.
Oh, okay, and I know that that bank is real steep,
Right.
so you're going to.
So when we do that, that'll give us the ability, because essentially right now, if the parking, if the edge of the parking bay is here, the sidewalk is probably up, at least so.
Right.
Maybe higher, so that is pretty steep slope. But if you move it out, say 12 to 15 feet, that gives us the opportunity to land on that slope.
Oh, okay, good, yeah, 'cause they keep putting rocks on there, and the rocks keep
Right.
falling down, and.
Dave, can you just make sure that you're speaking in the microphone?
I'm sorry.
So it's recorded
Yep.
for those viewing at home. Thank you.
Yep.
And on Traverwood, you're eliminating the left turn lane? So
Correct.
that's from Traverwood to Plymouth?
Yeah, the entirety of the project length from Plymouth, from Plymouth to Huron Parkway, that center left turn lane will be eliminated.
Oh, okay. Green Road, you're working on from Plymouth north, and are you removing any lanes of traffic? Are you reducing them on, excuse me, on Green Road in this section? And the reason I'm asking is that when we start doing work on Nixon Road, people are going to use Green Road as an alternative route. And we know that there's major work to be done on Green in future years.
So we're looking at, as I mentioned, extending the present configuration north of Burbank, which is 3 lanes, center left turn lane and 1 lane operating in both the north and in the southbound direction, with bike lanes on both sides of the road. Looking to extend that configuration just as far south as the Commonwealth Drive intersection. That's where it starts to widen out to 5 lanes and wider. We are currently analyzing what can be done south of that point, down to Plymouth Road, to continue the bike lanes without causing a major disruption in traffic and
Oh, okay.
movements through the intersection. But that, we have not finalized that analysis at this point in time.
Oh, okay. I would just request that you take into account the additional traffic volume if Nixon Road in either direction or both directions are closed for an extended period of time to do some of the renovations there, be it roundabouts or intersections.
We certainly
Is that-
can, but the chances are that work is going to occur much further in the future, and this work's proposed to be done.
Oh, I
in
understand
the
that, but
near
if we're
future.
narrowing a road that we know is going to have significant increased volume in a few years, we don't want to have to undo it.
Well,
And-
we'll certainly take
Yeah.
that into consideration.
Oh, okay. And my last question on South Huron Parkway, at the athletic entrance and exit, and it looks like that you're doing the path up to that first driveway, the southmost driveway on Huron Parkway.
Yeah, we're working from the intersection of Fuller north to that first driveway north at the Geddes Fuller intersection.
Okay. Could you evaluate the pork chop that's actually out in the right-of-way? You see right above that? Or
We
would
could,
that
but that's
require-
really, that's outside of the scope of this work. That would,
Okay, what would be needed to do that? Because I know that was put in about 2005, 2006. They paint yellow around it, and the paint is immediately worn off, and there are always black tire marks from people hitting it because they're not expecting a concrete curb out in the roadway.
we can work with our transportation and traffic engineering staff to take a closer look at that. And
Oh, okay.
Whether or not it would be addressed as part of this project, it's hard to say, but it's certainly something that could be that could be looked at.
Okay, thanks.
Other
Other
questions?
questions?
I have two. Just from your introduction, I was wondering if ADA requirements give greater weight or speed up a project if there are ADA needs to upgrade or whatever.
I guess it depends on the type of improvements that's needed.
Okay.
The amount of use that a particular location receives that needs those certain improvements.
So it doesn't put a big weight on it to,
No, I mean, we were under a mandate to improve certain locations throughout the city, which we've completed, I think as of last year or 2 years ago, I don't know for sure. So now we're going back. It's generally the sidewalk ramps themselves where we're making the most significant ADA improvements, and our sidewalk program addresses those. The resurfacing program doesn't focus on those types of improvements. It's more done through the sidewalk program. But we certainly look at, once we've decided and selected the candidate streets for improvements, we definitely have to bring anything that's non-compliant up into
okay,
compliance.
that helps me understand the
So.
priorities. The other is on Division Street. Will that be the first place in Ann Arbor where there's parking as part of the bike buffer?
I believe so. I don't think
Interesting.
we have that at any other location, so
So that'll be a
it's
learning
going to
curve.
be definitely be a learning curve, and it'll take some getting used to for
Yeah.
some of those parking users. So.
Great. Yes.
To follow up on that, first, thank you for the thorough presentation. Appreciated it. On Division, so I lived through a bunch of these bike lane conversions with parking protected facilities in New York City before I moved back to Ann Arbor. And it is a learning curve, but it's surprising how quickly people get used to it, as long as it's well marked. Do you know how big the buffer is between the bike lane and the sort of the edge of the parking?
I believe it's a 5-foot buffer. It's a
Okay.
5-foot bike lane. Again, that's an area where the curb is overlaid, so the bike lane is measured from the face of curb out 5 feet, and
Sure.
then it's a 5-foot buffer.
Okay,
With a
good,
7-foot,
yeah.
with a 7-foot parking lane.
Because that's, like, there are some that I've ridden on that don't have a buffer or much of a buffer, and then you're in the door zone, and it's not much of an improvement.
Yeah.
But that, as long as there's a sufficient buffer there, so people can open the door and get out without stepping right in front of cyclists, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great, and with all of the development that is happening and will be happening just to the west of there, seeing the pieces come together in that part of town is great to see. Yeah, I don't have any other questions. I'll just my only other comment, it's also nice to see improvements on Stone School, given that connects to one of the few ways to cross I-94 on a bike that isn't terrifying. So having improvements there for cyclists in particular is very welcome. So it's great to see that.
Yeah, we'll have a continuous improvement, continuous bike lane now from Packard all the way the entire length of Stone School.
Yes.
I just want to say thank you as well. It was nice to see that there was some non-motorized improvements and safety improvements on all the projects, and that there was the ability to, even for Stone School, to extend, the right of way to do that. I was just curious for Traverwood, is that the bike lane was added in the northbound direction? Is that right?
Correct, in the northbound, along the east side in the northbound direction.
Is that a I don't know that extent that well? Is that a grading question that's uphill for that?
Generally, if we only have opportunities to place a bike lane in one direction, we place it in the uphill
Yeah,
direction.
okay.
There are shared youth paths along each side of the road out there. Whether or not they're compliant with current standards, I don't believe so, but there are opportunities for cyclists to use those paths if they're not comfortable with riding on the street.
Okay.
Any other? Otherwise, we'll fall within the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the presentation. All right. And now we go to our next presentation. Eli leading this.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the commission. It's a pleasure to stand before you. I used to sit on the other side of the
Yeah.
table. My role here this evening is brief, and what I'd like to do is quickly introduce Stacy Meekins, who's a project manager with Sam Schwartz. You may recall last fall, we had identified that this firm was selected. We've completed the administrative contracting process and are now actively engaged in the transportation plan update project. And we had our first face-to-face meeting, city staff and the project team here in City Hall earlier today, so you're getting in on the ground floor. And with no further ado, I'll turn it over to Stacy, who will outline and overview the plan process for you.
Thanks.
Stacy?
Thanks. Good evening. Thank you for having me here. So the request for a proposal that we responded to last year was asking for a Vision Zero focused transportation plan. And for those who aren't familiar with the term, Vision Zero is an initiative to eliminate deaths and serious injuries caused by traffic crashes. And so that's a very bold vision, and we think it's admirable, but it's going to take some bold planning to get there. So we started out with this statement in our presentation to the city back in May, that in order to get to zero, to really achieve that vision, this plan must be driven by intention and inclusion. And I'll elaborate on that a little bit. And with respect to what makes a Vision Zero plan different from your traditional transportation plan, the wheel that you see is borrowed from the Vision Zero network, which is a nationwide conglomerate of cities that are trying to achieve a similar mission. And so these pie wedges are different elements of the plan and the process that we will go through to develop the plan. And so some of them encapsulate the inclusion part of that statement, that we really need to be including a diverse array of stakeholders and public in this plan. Vision Zero and achieving that is really going to take a cultural shift among the public, so we really need to engage as broad an audience as we can. And the intention part is really referring to the fact that we really need to be kind of laser focused on that vision in order to achieve it, and to really use the data that we have available to us to drive our investments. So this plan will take into account a really robust data analysis to help us in the city establish what are the strategies for moving forward and to develop the action plan. And so we put forth this slide. This is really a reflection of our values as a team as we move forward with this process. Our values for developing the plan are to engage that diverse audience that I mentioned. We want to present concepts and ideas in an understandable and clear way, and use that data-driven process, but be able to communicate what that data is telling us to the public and to stakeholders in a very clear and concise way. We want to be transparent, and part of that is this last value of linking the goals of the community with the strategies that we're proposing and measurable outcomes. So I was asked to just go through what our process will be, so you guys have an idea of what to expect moving forward. So we've broken it down into about 5 phases, and you'll see across the top what we're trying to do with that phase, and then across the bottom of your screen, you'll see how we're trying to engage the community in that step. So as Eli mentioned, we're at the ground floor. We are in the very initial stages, and what we're trying to do right now is make sure that our plan is relatable. So we went through a branding exercise with staff this afternoon. We're creating a plan name that's recognizable and the branding that goes along with it, including color palettes and templates and whatnot. And then as far as the community engagement process goes, this is the time where we're trying to just lay out a clear framework for that. So we've just drafted a public engagement plan and delivered that to the city today as well. So our next phase is really doing a visioning and goals assessment with the community. What do we want? What does the whole community want transportation to look like in Ann Arbor in the future? And so in order to develop that, we're going out to a number of focus groups. We have 5 focus groups in our scope. We're also going to be conducting pop-up meetings, which are basically public engagement events where we just go to an event that's already happening. We set up a booth at like a farmer's market, for instance, probably not in January, but some piggybacking off of events where people are already coming, so we're not asking them to come out to a special event for our plan. We'll also have 2 committees running throughout this process, and at each stage moving forward, starting with this phase, we will meet with those 2 committees to get input. So what we're really doing in this phase is trying to gather information from the public, and then we're going to bring that information to the committees to help develop the vision statement and develop the goals, and then start talking about performance measures. And then almost concurrently with that, or overlapping with that, our next phase is looking at the transportation system today. What are the strengths and weaknesses of that transportation system? So we're going to be looking at a lot of data. That's our data-driven analysis part. So we're looking at crash data, looking at the current infrastructure, but also the use, how many cars are on the road, how many bikes and pedestrians, if we have that data, how many people are using transit, which routes are they using, that kind of thing. And then our public engagement efforts during this phase will be, we have a walk shop scheduled, which is a walking workshop where we go out on the street with a group of stakeholders and maybe look at a particular intersection or corridor that's been a challenge for one reason or another and really workshop it. In this phase, we'll also do our first public open house. And again, have a couple meetings with those committees that I mentioned. So then the next phase is we've already established what the vision is, and we've established now where we are starting. And so the next step is to figure out how do we get there. So we'll be workshopping with the city staff. What are some of the strategies and projects, actual infrastructure projects, but also programs and policies that can help us get there. And so what this will start out as is a nice long laundry list that we will bring to the public in another open house and some pop-up meetings, bring to the committees, and start to whittle that down and sift through what are the priorities. And then that final phase is creating the actual plan that gives the city the framework and the actions necessary to move forward to achieve that vision. So part of that phase is identifying if there are trade-offs between some of the things that have risen to the top, evaluating and helping the city actually establish what should they be evaluating as they move forward into implementation, setting out some timelines and identifying potential opportunities for funding and partnerships to help get these projects done. So that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions?
Sorry, I'm trying to get my mic on. Thank you. Could you talk a little bit more about the two committees you mentioned? Like who's going to be on those committees? How are they selected? I'm just curious.
Sure. We're still sorting that out. We have what we're calling a technical committee and a community advisory committee. And so we're sorting through who's on which committee and what the representation will be. Yeah, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and I love seeing there's lots of community engagement moments throughout the entire process. I'll be curious to follow this and learn a little bit more about how we're doing outreach to communities who don't just show up.
One thing I didn't, sorry, don't mean to interrupt, but one thing I realize now that I didn't touch on is we will have extensive online engagement as well throughout the whole process. So we'll be doing online surveys. We'll have opportunities through the city's website to get involved, and then social media to make sure that people are aware of when we are actually there in person as well. So they can engage in person, but they could also engage online.
It's good to know that. That's the means. I'm thinking above and beyond that, just understanding who's being sort of actually providing input and not, and making sure we understand who we're hearing from and who we're not hearing from, and if we're missing pieces to really be able to acknowledge that and pull those people in, especially from an equity angle. Like a lot of people don't have time and aren't aware and aren't paying attention, and there are a lot of people who have a lot of time and are paying a lot of attention, and so
yeah, absolutely.
Making sure that we're hearing from everybody. So yeah, great, thanks.
Yes.
Could you just explain the timeline from start to finish and moving through the different stages?
Yes. So overall, we're looking at probably an 18 to 20 month process. I don't have each of those phases at the top of my head right now, but we have laid out a tentative schedule.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Kathy Griswold, one of the city council members, and I've spent about 20 years in the corporate world actually implementing some quality improvement methodology, which Vision Zero is based on, so I'm really excited about this project. And I have a few questions, and then also, there are some other, when you mention stakeholders, there are some other organizations that maybe you already have on the list. Watts, I was at a meeting this morning where they were talking about Vision Zero. Last night, the Sierra Club had a speaker talking about dark skies. And so we're looking at how to optimize pedestrian safety while minimizing light exposure. SEMCOG is just now forming a bike and pedestrian committee, so that's happening. And maybe not today, but could you share with the public at some point the successes of New York City with Vision Zero? Because I think that's really important. When I mentioned, a lot of people sort of look like Vision Zero, that doesn't make sense. But then when you look at the actual data and see the improvements in New York City's crash statistics, it's really great. Who do you think is going to be the champion of this? Because in most quality improvement projects, you really need a high-level person who's going to set the tone for the project and ensure its success.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the city players that well yet, but what I've seen with Vision Zero, you can find champions in a number of different areas and corners of the community. So we work in Vision Zero in Chicago, and some of the biggest champions there are public health department. You know, the non-motorized or active transportation advocates are always pretty good advocates of Vision Zero as well. So those are kind of two likely places to look. I've also seen mayors and administrators be the champion in some cases. So it kind of depends on the community.
Oh, okay. Now, are you going to coordinate with the University of Michigan at all?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, they're on our stakeholder list, and as are Watts and SEMCOG.
Okay, great. And my last question is, this is going to be an 18-month project, and we have some really critical needs right now. We've had 3 pedestrian crashes in like the last 10 days, one of them extremely serious. So is there a way that we can realize some of the improvements of Vision Zero before the end of the 18-month study?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody from the city wants to jump in. I think that there are certainly opportunities that maybe the city's working on some right now outside of this process, but in terms of how our plan impacts improvements, one of the things that we like to look at in any plan we do is what are those short-term things that you can do right away, and in some cases before our plan is even completed.
Oh, okay, great. And I just thought of one other thing. In terms of stakeholders, as a result of the recent pedestrian crashes, there are about 150 comments right now out on maybe 2 or 3 Facebook pages. So if you think that's useful, I could get those links for you.
Yeah, that would be great.
Oh, okay, because it's not just people complaining, but there were a lot of recommendations. Well, you can do this based on the fact that I drive through there or walk through this area every day.
Yeah.
So, okay, thanks.
I'd be happy to take that.
Any other questions or comments? Great, thank you very much. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
All right. So I believe we move into committee reports then. And first on the list is the micromobility.
Sorry, I missed the last meeting. I got some notes from Molly, who sits on the micromobility subcommittee, with feedback for the statement of values. So we met a couple of weeks ago, incorporated that feedback. I think the changes to the draft were pretty minor. There were a lot of like minor reordering of words and changing things. We didn't really change the meaning very much through most of it. I think the biggest change is we changed the order of the items, since we were sort of listing them in order of importance to move safety and physical accessibility much higher on the list. Other than that, moving forward with the subcommittee, we did hear from some folks in the city that they are actively working on an ordinance to clarify and make our local rules about where these new vehicle types can operate consistent with state law, and to sort of clarify, I think, what we want to see. And so we're expecting to get a draft of that in one form or another for the subcommittee to review in our first meeting in early February. And that was the thing that was on our list as the second thing we wanted to really tackle, because there's some, I think, confusion about what the actual rules are, and I think some inconsistencies in terms of what our current rules are and how the state regulates some of these vehicles. So we want to make sure we are being clear with that and make sure that's consistent, and so then we can start to educate people on what really they should or shouldn't be doing. For example, I think right now under local rules, e-scooters shouldn't be in bike lanes, but we probably want to allow them there and not on sidewalks and that kind of thing. Yeah, and also Bird had left town, but apparently they came back. So they're just now operating under the interim contract with the city. I don't think there's probably any updates on that yet. But we'll be waiting eagerly to see sort of what the first data dumps look like, and how that kind of gets up and running, to be ready to continue to provide feedback. So that's where they are in terms of the statement of values. I would hope that to hear a motion to recommend the commission adopt them. But otherwise, that's it for me, unless anybody has questions.
Yeah, I was trying to I was reading over it, and I was kind of trying to wonder. I saw some statements, but I was like looking for something about like accessibility for riders with disabilities, and was wondering if that got incorporated in and in what form, because
it did. Let me bring it up. I don't have it in front of me, and I will highlight, I think, where we tried to address that. So number 2, which was moved up higher on the list, was look for opportunities for enhanced physical accessibility in vehicle types, and while preventing and mitigating negative impacts to physical accessibility of our system. So I think we felt like that sort of one gave a statement of values that we're really looking for accessibility in these vehicle types and wanting to push on these providers to the extent that we can to look for those opportunities to get those different kinds of vehicles on the streets, but also at the same time, while we're working with these operators to ensure that we're coming up with ways to avoid negative impacts like scooters blocking sidewalks, for example.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, okay, yeah, now I see it, yeah.
Okay, great.
Well, we can have a motion then.
I move to adopt the proposal.
All right,
As revised.
seconded. Any other discussion? Thanks for listening to us. No other discussion? Then all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, we have that going back to you, and
Great,
we'll look
yep.
forward to the next.
Yeah, thanks, and we'll, and look forward to discussing the ordinance changes and keeping everybody up to date on how things keep going.
Thank you, Scott.
Great.
Molly.
All right, Cyrus, do you want to take the next part about the CIP committee?
Sure. Brad's not here to speak to it. He usually does the heavy lifting for us. But we met in December and kind of went over the CIP as currently programmed. And there was a sort of focus on certain project types. We actually sort of handled a few. Our discussion was sort of, with the knowledge that we would be talking about some resurfacing projects today, and we kind of focused on, I guess, really the Barton project was sort of the project we dove the deepest on, which I don't know if we have. I guess it's sort of reflected in the meeting notes what came of that, and there's been some city council movement since then. Is that right, Kayla?
Raymond, do you have a
Yeah, my
current
understanding, so we're talking about the A2 STEAM
Yes.
project up there, yeah. So that one went back before council at the last meeting, if I'm not mistaken, for reconsideration and a vote of the previous vote, and that passed again, I think, at a different vote. It passed initially 9-2, and now it passed 7-4, if memory serves me correctly. So again, this is the special assessment / getting approval to move forward with the design. And so this was vote 2 of 4. So there's still other times that it has to go before council as well.
Okay. Yeah, that was the specific project we talked the most about. I think more generally, like I said, we knew we were going to dive into a few during this meeting. We also compiled a list of potentially others to discuss, during this before this construction season or before the next construction season. Really with an eye on that next year or two, to be able to have the kind of discussion we had essentially today. The projects I'll reference today had, I think, enough non-motorized improvements that there wasn't, it was mostly, kudos as opposed to discussion. But, if there was a need for it, we'd essentially, be able to have that discussion early on, I think was really the key. So we put that list together, and I think before our next meeting, I don't have the calendar in front of me, but should be March or
March
It's
6th
March.
or something like that, yeah.
So our plan, I think, will be to sort of winnow that list down and potentially ask the city to meet either with us as a smaller committee, or we ideally would like, if we can keep the list of projects scoped well enough like we did today, to be able to talk about it in a larger commission, because we really value everyone else's input. So I don't know, is that a fair assessment?
That sounds great.
I came to the meeting a little bit late and left a little bit early, so I might have.
That sounds great. I was also pleased that I got some phone calls from people who are concerned about some of the projects. To me, that's a success when people call up to complain. All right. So if there are no other questions or follow-up, we'll go on to the annual report. And you have the final version of that, which we would like to present to City Council, and also have a matter of record. Is there any need for discussion on that, or should I just take a motion to approve that report? Scott?
I'll move to approve the report.
All right.
And I will also move to thank everybody who worked on it. It's great.
Yeah, it came together nicely.
I will second that motion.
All right. Any other discussion? It's a historical document. All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Yes, okay. And as widely as we can disseminate that, the
And
better.
so the motion, I understand, is to approve the annual report and forward to City Council, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But you're also welcome to put it on your websites and give it to your relatives who don't understand what you're doing on the commission. Okay, and then we have the work plan. And as we say repeatedly, this is a work-in-progress plan. Kayla?
Yeah, so we incorporated some changes to the work plan based on the feedback that we heard last time. A few of the items that were raised, you'll see in the potential future agenda items section at the end of the work plan, where we didn't have a specific month pegged that we could anticipate that item coming, but we didn't want to lose track of what was raised in last month's discussion. So, as Linda Diane said, this is always a work in progress. This gives us a guide to look to as we do agenda setting each month. We're happy to entertain any additional modifications if you want to discuss anything further tonight. But we also always discuss future agenda items at the end of, towards the end of each meeting. We'll raise up what's on the work plan and what other things, what other ideas should be brought forward. So there are continued opportunities throughout the year for agenda setting. But
Great.
happy to discuss anything further.
And that discussion can take place offline as well. Any comments? All right, then somehow it creeped up that we have the chair and vice chair elections tonight.
Yes. So according to the bylaws, the term runs until the last day of February. So I think, I was trying to figure out if they had to be tonight, if you would prefer to defer those to February. I think you still could, because you can stay in your existing positions until the end of February, and you meet next on February 20th. But if you are ready to make your elections now, then you could do that tonight.
Okay. Just as long as people had a chance to think about that, and if is there anybody interested in serving in either of those positions, or if you want another month to consider it.
Oh, I'm sorry, I stand corrected. I knew I reread this multiple times to try to understand what the bylaws say.
Okay.
The elections of officers shall be held no later than the month before the officer's term expires. So since the term expires at the end of February, that's why they needed to, I knew there was a reason
Okay.
why I put it on here. I'm sorry.
But, so I can be clear that I would be willing to serve for one more year, and at that point, I would not serve any additional terms, because I don't believe in consolidating power in that way. That's.
I would move to have Linda Diane Fout continue another year of being the chief of this body.
Okay, do you want to amend, are you seconding? I'm just seconding. Okay, we could amend that to also include a vice chair, which could continue to be Robert Gordon.
I would happily accept that.
Okay, so we're going with status quo. Okay, any discussion? Anybody feel like we're rushing this, or they feel slighted? Okay. Then all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, well, I appreciate that.
And you can all be thinking about your next year elections, because the bylaws also state, although you've already said you wouldn't plan on serving more than 3 years, you can only serve for 3 consecutive terms.
That's
So
a good bylaw.
we'll
I think I
need
put that in there.
You may have. We'll need a new chair and vice chair come 2020.
So the campaign starts now.
Yeah. Start thinking about that.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And I think that with my health recovery going full speed ahead, I might even be a better chair this year. We'll see. Okay. Then we have liaison reports. And I did not ask Sergeant Clark ahead of time if he'd be willing to speak to some of the recent accidents that have occurred, if you can give us an update or anything that would be of value.
I can't really give too much of an update on the Huron Thayer crash. That's still very active. We're obviously just occurred Monday night, so we're still in the early phase of collecting information and evidence. So anything more that was in MLive or the other news outlets, I'm not prepared to comment on at this time.
Okay.
With the stadium in Edgewood, the young man that was struck over there, I was not on scene. They did not call the crash team out because of his condition at the time of the crash. So I don't have much information on how he's doing now. Or the driver was determined to be at fault and was ticketed. And that's really all I can determine from the UD10 or prepared to give from the UD10 report.
Thank you. Are there any other reports from people who serve as liaisons to another group? Scott?
I'll also point out, I think we skipped over the transportation project updates.
Oh, you're right. Thank you.
Should we do that first?
Yes.
Okay.
And he didn't even say anything, so.
No problem. No, I couldn't interrupt that. It was too important. So yeah, I'll gladly go through the transportation project updates relatively quickly. The biggest thing to really note is we're starting to kind of pivot 2018 to 2019. So some of the projects that were completed in 2018 that aren't going to carry over, you'll see that those have been removed from the report just because now that we're entering a new year and a new construction cycle, we're starting to kind of focus on the next year of construction. So you'll notice, for example, the sidewalk repair program, and some other projects, the 7th Street improvements, some of those were just shifted to reflect the next calendar year and construction year. All right, scrolling through, there's a little bit of information on the North Maple Road restriping and crosswalks program. There was a new website that was added, and we are currently working on a web page to solicit public comment from those who weren't able to attend the public meeting that we held back in December. So we have a draft right now that we're reviewing, and hopefully that'll go live here relatively shortly before the end of the month, and we'll broadcast that out so that people have a chance to go in and give recommendations electronically. Let's see. Oh, I did just want a little bit of a teaser campaign on page 3. There is mention of some of the school safety improvements. We are reporting to council at the end of January pursuant to one of the resolutions, R-18497, on the different crosswalk improvements and lighting improvements that are going to be done. We'll make sure to share that report with this commission after it's been transmitted to City Council. So keep an eye out for that, probably at next month's meeting. Let's see.
That report is not going to include what's the improvements that have been done, but it's also going to identify deficiencies such as crosswalks without illumination. Okay, thanks.
Correct. Yeah, what we're doing right now is we're trying to take a lot of disparate data sets right now that we have and trying to compile them and fill in the gaps where we have them. And so, yeah, we've just been collecting all the data that we can to make sure we give as good a report as possible on those things.
Oh, okay, thanks. I know that A2 Safe Transport is anxiously awaiting the
Sure.
report.
All right. There's some updated language about the Ann Arbor STEAM Safe Routes to School project, similar to what we just discussed about the action that council took. There's also updated language on Hoover Hill and Green improvements. That project is moving forward. There was a public meeting scheduled for tomorrow night, January 17th, from 5:30 to 7 p.m. Here in council chambers. So there's an opportunity to find more information out about that tomorrow if you'd like. And I think that might conclude the bulk of updates that I wanted to provide. We're moving forward with the transportation plan, but you got an update on that. So yeah, those are the major highlights I wanted to share with you all today.
Great. And I've asked Ray and Kayla to explore the possibility of providing this plan more broadly to the public, including perhaps a subscription service available on the website, and other ways to make sure that people who are interested can get this monthly update. So I assume there would be no objections to that, and we'll see what's possible. Scott, did you?
Yeah, I just had one, like probably too specific of a question, but I'm curious, and this is an opportunity for me to ask it. So as part of the Detroit Street Farmers Market Area project, which is the DDA
Correct.
project that is wrapped up, or mostly wrapped up, is the Fifth Avenue component here part of that, or is that separate from this list?
So my understanding is the project isn't complete yet. There were
Okay.
aspects of the project that weren't done or weren't able to be completed before the end of the construction season.
Yeah.
So the traffic was restored and what have you, but they're still going to have to go back next spring and finish some aspects of the project. But I can get a more detailed list of what those changes are.
Sure,
for
yeah,
next
and my specific question is, and I emailed the DDA about this, because in the earlier planning phases, there was a plan to reconfigure the Beeks and Fifth intersection, which got cut from the scope. And when the response I got was a little vague, and I figured I would look into it later, but they hinted that there's some talk about people looking at Beeks in that area in general for future planning. I'm just curious if you know anything about that, or if there's anything I can look for to learn more about what's happening there.
You know, I don't know of a specific project that's incorporated into right now. I know there are bigger discussions right now related to MDOT's Main Street project that,
Right.
May not necessarily directly be impacted by that, and some others, but I can follow up. I actually have a meeting with DDA tomorrow, and I can kind of brainstorm with them on what specific projects they have in mind on that.
Yeah, I was disappointed to see that get cut. I used to, for 3 years, I walked my daughter to preschool there every day on that corner, and that's a dangerous intersection with people flying through that turn still. And that whole corridor from the bridge all the way to North Main is still problematic, I think. And the North Main intersection is one that has a high crash volume. It's one of the bigger crash intersections. I have more than one neighbor who's been hit by a car there, and one with really bad injuries. So I would definitely love to see attention on that whole corridor at some point. So anyway,
Yeah.
just wanted to raise that since that didn't make it in. I'm really hoping we don't lose track of that stretch.
Noted. Thank you for that.
Any other questions or comments? Thanks again. It's a great report, which I hope more people can see. So we'll go back to liaisons if they have anything to report. Anybody else? All right, now do we have any commission information to share?
Madam Chair, if I may, I spoke to Liz Margolis from schools today, and she asked that I share with the commission, some of you may have seen this already, that at Angel Elementary School, they're applying for a Zen Drive grant. It's kind of a social media competition, as I understand it. There was an article in MLive on January 7th that kind of gave the details, but ultimately, it's a Fund My Streets campaign. It's hashtag Fund My Streets, all one word. And if you tag at ZenDrive, hashtag Fund My Streets, and at A2 Schools, that kind of gets them bumped up in their scoring criteria and makes them more eligible for funding. It's $50,000 that they'd be looking at funding some of the study to improve access to Angel, including discussions about the Washtenaw Hill intersection, which gets a lot of attention. So anything we can do to kind of promote that, I think, is a good thing. So.
Okay, can you say the URL one more time?
I can send you I will
Okay.
send the commission the information of how to support.
Okay.
Or for those watching on television, if you go to the MLive article on January 7th, it's titled Ann Arbor School Among Finalists for $50,000 Street Grant in Nationwide Contest. And it has instruction there as well.
All right. Shall we talk about the agenda for next time then?
Sorry.
Yes.
I realized, I just wanted to say from Planning Commission, I missed my chance there.
Yeah.
So we did vote to recommend the approval of the CIP to City Council last night. Just to give you a little bit of summary in terms of what came up from discussion, a lot of transportation-related things, obviously. There was a lot of discussion about the border-to-border trail funding, which is a lot of that's been pushed out due to sort of uncertainty about what the plan is going to be, especially along the Fuller corridor there, which I guess they're still trying to figure out what to do. I think there's some pushback about whether some of the trail connections could still be made or not from advocates. So I think that's going to be an ongoing discussion, at least from the advocacy side, to see whether and how we can move those up. I'll also note that the categorization breakdown has been changed based on the recommendation from this commission. So active transportation was separated from roads, from other transportation. So it's a little easier to see the different buckets of money. So thank you all for that recommendation, and that made it in. And as noted from the CIP committee report, the Washington Bicycle Boulevard, which was identified in, I believe, in the transportation plan or the non-motorized plan, wasn't in the CIP, and it was added, but it is added. The money is allocated at the end. I think we'll see whether that makes sense to move up, and I think the plan update might be an opportunity to see if that kind of thing makes sense to incorporate into our ongoing planning. I hope it will. In addition to the low-stress bicycle network signage money, which I think also came out of discussions from this commission. I think Commissioner Parsons in particular was advocating for that, and that money showed up in the CIP as well. So I just wanted to summarize that for you all and let you know where that was at. So thanks.
Thank you.
Great. And any other? Okay, so the agenda.
I can share what's on the work plan. So we have, for the February 20th meeting, the micromobility committee recommendations are listed. The committee has 2 meetings planned in February to take place before the February 20th commission meeting. So I think they may have something to bring back, but I would consider that kind of to be determined depending on how those meetings go. Quiet zone, review draft recommendations. I don't know, Raymond, if you have any knowledge whether that's still on track, anticipated to be ready by February?
I believe it is. I know there's a final draft that's circulating around. There's some changes being made based on staff comments, but I suspect that those are on schedule to be reported back in February.
And then also road diet evaluations was something we slated, thinking we'd have that ready.
Yeah, that's on schedule as well to be brought back before this commission next month.
And then I'm going to suggest that we insert a consent agenda to make agenda approval and minutes a little bit faster. We could save 2 minutes at least. So we'll try that out at the next meeting. Anything else? Yeah.
In addition to the 2 pedestrian crashes that we know about from the media, there was also a pedestrian crash this morning at Catherine and Fifth. The child was taken to the doctor by his father, and a police report was to have been filled out. And the driver did not stop, and it was a student going to community high school. He had taken the bus and got off at the Blake Center and was walking to community high school. So I think that it would be helpful for us to look at some of the crash data sooner rather than later. I know that that's being done as part of the big Vision Zero project, but if there's anything that can be done sooner, and for example, Edgewood and Stadium, that crosswalk, the community and A2 Safe Transport recommended RRFBs above the roadway with lighting above the roadway. I even had a discussion with one of the consultants, and Liz Margolis and I both remember it the same way, that, that we ask for what was on Carpenter Road. Pittsfield Township had put in some RRFBs, and that Eric Lipson has been working on trying to get a refuge island. So both of those features were requested. They weren't provided, and the community is quite concerned at this point that we've had a injury accident at that location, and we didn't provide a robust crosswalk there.
So you're suggesting a resolution or something of that sort
To-
as a future agenda item?
To support that, and to also look at the,
Okay.
the Huron crosswalk at Thayer, which also has some deficiencies, and that's one where the university, MDOT, everyone agrees there are deficiencies, but we don't seem to move forward with any results. So that, a resolution on that would probably be helpful as well.
Okay. And I might ask for some other information before that comes before the commission?
Yeah, I think we'll probably need some follow-up, maybe between Councilmember Griswold and Linda Diane and staff to determine what it is that, to ask the commission exactly to be acting on, or if you're looking for
Including
something
where
from staff
it
to be
stands now.
prepared.
Oh, okay, and I just have a quick question. The border-to-border trail, could Greenbelt funds be used, or has all the land already been identified and it's either owned by the university or the city? I'm just wondering what could be done to move that forward. And I don't know, Scott, if you know that answer from planning.
Yeah, I don't know whether there's any land acquisition that's required. I think the biggest issues are, there are plans for bridge underpasses, and there are actually already concrete pads under the bridges near Maiden Lane and Fuller, and I think in the Fuller, I know there, and I'm not sure exactly where they all are, but they were built when the bridges were built with the intent of creating bicycle underpasses, and I think there's some reticence to complete the work to connect those and spend the money if those bridges and or the road configuration around there may need to change.
So instead of getting into that now,
Yeah,
Gordon
so
may
we
know
can-
the name of the person from the Washtenaw Biking and Walking Coalition who seems to have the most information on that, and he
Yeah.
can give you that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so he would be a good person to talk to, but I don't think
So-
there's much land. I think it's more about like making the connections or improving connections where they're not fully through, like, and it's things like going under 14 and things like that too, so.
But if there's some question about the border-to-border trail you want on a future agenda item, then let us know what that might be.
Oh, okay, I think that would be a good idea, and we can identify what the constraints are, and again, maybe have a resolution to support it.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Great. Then that's for the agenda, and of course, you can contact us between now and our agenda setting meeting is usually the first Friday of the month. So that's coming up really fast. The next meeting will be February 20th at 7 o'clock, right here in the second floor of the City Council. And if there are no other further items, then I will call this meeting adjourned by 8:30. Yes. Let's bang on something.